Who do they get to drive some of these 935s that have this surge and they're a 4-speed? It isn't a 6-speed with close ratio gears. There's a big.
Porschephiles, auto enthusiasts, welcome to Marc Bixen Live, a video and audio podcast about Porsches, lifestyles, and all things motorsports. Hosted by Porsche expert, owner of Los Angeles' world-renowned Porsche repair shop, Redline Service. So let's kick back, shift gears, and get to the action. Here's your host, Marc Bixen.
And welcome to another episode of Marc Bixen Live. Today is episode 5, part 2 of the Drivers Series with American legend, Le Mans winner, NASCAR driver, Rick Knoop. Rick is kind enough to come in and do a nice long interview with us. Before we go on to the part 2, I just want to give a shout out to our friend Jay Leno, who had a recent accident and he's making just a fine recovery. Hope to see you out at the car event soon. So the Formula One season has ended recently, and we want to give a big congratulations to Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team. Of course, Ferrari for finishing second. We're always Ferrari fans. Can't wait for next season. Looks like Lewis Hamilton has all the determination he needs to come back. So if he's got a good set of wheels underneath him, we should see one hell of a series next year. And here we go with part 2. Redmond, David Piper, Sir Sterling Moss, Justin Bell, Hurley, Vic. Maybe we got to open the frame and have you sign it.
Whoa, Jesus. No, man, that's a little ahead of me, but if you want, this ain't my last visit.
This one's signed by all the RS Spider drivers, Lucas Lohr and all those guys. This is one of Roy's photos. Roy also passed. We lost Roy in 16. This was one of Peter Hansel's shirts at Gurney, and This was his hat at PPI. Pat gave me that at his memorial, and that's the shirt I used to wear when we worked F2000.
I ran against these cars at Sebring. These are fast, the Spiders.
It's funny how he hid the Honda there on the other side. When Porsche introduced the 996, they did it at Barcelona. This is what all the people from Porsche wore.
I'm loving it.
So
it's beautiful.
So we got that.
You know, the European driver's suits, man, were always like, I remember when we were getting our Stan 21s when we were going in Group C2.
They're still wearing cotton single layers?
Oh, no, we had Nomex crotch things, almost anticipating a fire. We're driving from Mazda, and I'm going, holy crap. And we were walking around saying, these things all look like a sack of potatoes, because, you know, Simpson was always giving you the Superman broad shoulders.
Yep.
And we were wearing these things, and the European suits, bless their hearts, have always looked like, you know, they aren't going down a runway at the Four Seasons in Newport. You know what I'm saying?
It's that old Jacques Villeneuve look.
Yeah,
big.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
So, and then one of my clients, his dad used to sponsor F1. So this was one of the mechanic suits from the Lamborghini Larrousse team.
No kidding.
Back in the day. Yeah. And then he sent me some other fun stuff over here. Yvonne Capelli, Silverstone 88. This is Gugelmin. These Olivier Guillard used at Adelaide. Luciano Benetton gave him that as a present when he was a kid. That's an Emmanuel.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Got one of George's horn buttons there. George doesn't even have one of those.
I ran against those Porsches that you've got the picture of at the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring, and I was driving an ex-Dyson car, Andy Wallace car. It was. And we were running 6th overall in a big Audi freight train, and the year was 2006. I'd kind of come back a little bit for
the Le Mans cars, the diesels.
Yeah. And we were in the MG, they called it, and Duncan Dayton had bought the car from the Dysons for a 30-mile-an-hour corner. I had to have a guy with a boom mic. It was Phil Harris with a boom mic. And earphones go, nope, stay in it, spike. Because you've got mechanical grip coupled with aero. Yep. And all of a sudden when I would hit, the telemetry was 900 pounds on a non-power assist brake pedal. And I thought, I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's 900 pounds his foot's putting in the
pedal. And most of the time you roll it on because it's a light car, but it gives you an idea from going to 170 to a 30-mile-an-hour Sterling Moss hairpin in the length of a basketball court. And I go, no. We never did this in the 962s, the 934s, the 935s, the R's. Okay, Spike. And I'm going, I'm just doing a Hail Mary that there wasn't.
You're looking at the telemetry and you're going, okay, the other guy did it. How the? Where?
Yeah.
Wait, how late is that? My
Yeah.
spike's here and his spike's here?
I wanted to preserve the reputation of being a guy that brings cars home, and that's why the phone still rings. I'm an older guy now, but at the same time, watching some of the cars come out of these collections, a lot of these people, who do they get to drive some of these 935s that have this surge and they're a 4-speed? It isn't a 6-speed with close ratio gears. There's a big, and sometimes you're going, good Lord, is there a dragon in town? I see flames, I see whistles and raw fuel.
Whenever the booze come in.
Yeah, so
They're not used to that.
I'm so happy and proud that I'm healthy, but I work on it because I can make good traffic decisions in cars that are worth more than any home I've ever lived in.
You know, I went up to the Velocity Invitational
Yes.
this month,
Yes.
and they had Sterling Moss's 300 SLR there.
Yes, they did.
And Derek Hill got to drive it on
Yeah.
Saturday, and Stefan Johansson on Sunday.
Yes.
Stefan wants to be on the show. We talked. I've known Derek for years.
Same,
You know,
yeah.
he instructed when I was in the Ferrari Challenge, and
Right.
you know, growing up. I lived in Santa Monica. I used to have breakfast with Phil and
Phil and
Alma
Earl.
at Froman's Deli. We'd go
Yep.
to the deli for breakfast, and so I asked Derek. I said, you know, what was it like? Because I mean, he was lighting up the tires, accelerating out of 2 in Sterling Moss's car.
That's what I'm talking
He was
about.
pushing it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I said, so what was it like? He said, well, highlight of my life. And
Yeah.
I said, highlight of your life driving Sterling's? He said, no. He drove George's car in the afternoon, the 91710.
right.
And he said, I've never driven
And that
anything
wasn't
like
on the menu. That wasn't on his specific cars to run. But because of Derek and because of a whole lot of things, he's another one that when he leaves the pits, it comes where? Back to the pits. My dad, Phil Hill was with us at the 24 Hours of Le Mans for the last 5 hours in our specific pits. And the reason was we were an American team driving for a German company called the Kramer Brothers.
Sure.
And in doing so, none of us, Mark and Donovan, had been to Le Mans before. Manfred and Erwin Kramer had been to Le Mans.
Had you been to Europe before?
No.
So you had everything.
As a tourist. But I'm driving
I
to...
mean, the first time I was in France, I was so proud of myself because my chick went for a haircut, and I went to just a restaurant, and I got myself an espresso. And I was just so excited that I could, you know, communicate to the guy that I wanted an espresso. I wanted to get it to go, but apparently that's not a thing over there.
No.
They never figured that one out.
They'll throw it at you. Yes,
But I brought a bicycle with me, and I was doing a lot of cycling back in the 80s and 90s.
Oh,
I was
my.
a Cat 3 road racer.
Whoa.
And so I was riding 350 miles a week, you know, all the canyons, stuff
Oh,
like that.
whoa.
So the first time I went to Europe, first or second time, I brought a bike with me. I was there 2 weeks, and so I got to do a bunch of rides, and we were in Paris, and there was a 100-kilometer ride on a Sunday,
Yes.
a club ride, and they had heard I was a halfway decent rider, so they hooked me up with a guy who had been a pro, and he had done the tour and stuff like that, spoke no English, and so we're out, and you do 100 kilometers, and about every 10 kilometers or so, there's a checkpoint, and they give you a little card, and they stamp it.
To make sure that
Well, I'm the only idiot wearing a helmet in 1990. So every checkpoint we went up to, they look at, the American's coming, you know, because only Americans wore helmets back then.
Okay.
And every checkpoint we came into, the American, you know.
Oh my God, aren't they funny? You know, I did an interview with the Greenwoods, and John Greenwood, you might remember, had the
Corvettes.
big Corvettes.
There was one of those at Velocity, one of his cars.
Exactly.
Was
Well,
up there. I used to watch them race at the Glen.
And I raced against them in my Porsche races and stuff. But when they went to Europe, and you're talking about the story, here comes the American. If you ever want to watch the gendarmes, if I'm saying that right, the police there, need to almost really keep crowd control. It isn't necessarily for the 512M, the 512S, the Porsches and stuff. It's these big-throated V8s that guys like Petty and guys like the Allisons had made what live. But Greenwood was on that ragged edge with the cross-injected
that's
aluminum
so
block,
loud.
and they were popping motors, brother, like throwing Molotov cocktails. And if you were at the bankings at a place called Daytona and John Greenwood was there before the kink, I'm talking about 223 in a big Corvette, sitting in that like Whistler's mother.
His cars were breaking 200.
Oh, God, yes. So I'm on the phone with Bert Greenwood, who is a survivor, but John it was a classic and a driver. And he said, Rick, I just want to tell you one thing. I said, what's that, Bert? Because we had an IMSA revival on the radio. He said, I just think you were so fortunate to go to Le Mans. He says, my Le Mans experience, and especially to be on the podium twice. I said, well, gosh, thanks. I was with some really good people. He says, yeah, my Le Mans experience, he says, I never even made it to the green flag. And he said, I know, but I said, but let me get back to what I was talking about. Those gendarmes were like a picket fence, and they're trying to keep the crowd like dachshunds because they're going Sacre Bleu, listen. It sounded like Orange County International Raceway. Everyone dug it. And it was an era that Brooks
Well, they
Cunningham
brought back
or
the sounds
Briggs
of the Cobras, because
Yeah.
the last time they had heard it was during the Cobras.
and Briggs Cunningham and Lee Monstra, a Cadillac powered manhole cover. It looked like something that was going to Bonneville, and it was called Le Monstre for the
I remember
monster.
The monster was it brown?
Yeah, brown. It ended up
Terrible
like
color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's so many fun stuff, and I think in an effort to watch what the V8s have done through a series called that Bill France developed. Good Lord. I mean, now these prototype races are, I don't have to educate any of you guys because you're both motorsports freaks like I am. I mean, you can't break these Cadillacs. And they take off and they've got
All
torque.
these new cars.
Yeah.
All these new cars. I mean, the reliability compared to what we grew up with.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
See, in my era, you got hurt and sometimes killed in the cars. We have a little bumper pool stuff going on now.
so my dad, when I was born, my dad was racing a two-stroke Saab in hill climbs on the East Coast.
Really?
When I was 1, he bought his first Porsche. He bought a 57 Speedster in 62. You know, he had seen the magazines with Phil Hill on the cover of Motor Trend and Road and Track and all that. And my dad was a kid from Brooklyn that worked in Manhattan. But, he started doing the hill climbs with the Saab. Then he bought a 57 Speedster that by 62, the floors were already completely rusted out.
Yeah.
And he went to SCCA school. And then his one of the other guys in the SCCA school was a guy named Gene Nelson, and he was lead mechanic for Lake Underwood.
Oh, my.
And so Gene showed up. 62 was the year that Lake Underwood bought the 550 Spider from Penske.
Mm-hmm.
He had Penske's old car. So he gave Gene his national championship winning Speedster from the year before for Gene to go to SCCA school. So my dad's got this clap together one with pop riveted floors in it, this new tool called the pop rivet tool, and Gene Nelson has a national winning. But they just became friends, and Gene used to come over the house and stuff like that. So we were always into car racing. We used to go to the Glen for the 6 hours and the FIA 6 hours and the F5000 things. We went to Bridgehampton. We went to Lime Rock. My dad had a bad accident at Lime Rock in '64.
In
In the Speedster.
Okay.
Bottom of the downhill.
Yeah.
He got tapped from behind.
Uh-oh.
The car, according to spectators, front over back 3 times, barrel rolled 5 times, ended up upside down.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know if a Speedster goes fast enough for that many flips,
Yeah.
but he woke up in Sharon Hospital 4 hours later.
I'm
And my
surprised
mom was
he's
there
alive.
with me and my brother and pregnant with my sister, and so my dad decided not to race after that. But always had a Porsche in the garage. And so when I was a teenager, I got into motocross. And I got into enduros, and I did fairly well with that. When we moved to California, my dad got involved in a shop that we did up on Robertson by Burton Way. And we did Ferrari, Porsche, Lamborghini, Rolls, like that. And one year my dad just said, I want to have some fun with the boys. And my dad, my brother, and we all went to wrestle school at
Laguna?
Riverside.
Oh, at Riverside.
At Riverside. And we had a great time. Al Arciero was in my class. They invited me back for the graduate runoffs. I did well, but it got political. I don't want to talk about politics, but it got political. But it was fun. I certainly should have gone on from there. But in hindsight, that was the same year that Tommy Kendall and Jeff Krosnoff went through. And we know that what happened to both of them.
Yeah.
We lost Krosnoff. Tommy can barely walk these days. And I'm thinking, maybe it's a good thing I didn't go on to be a race car driver.
Yeah.
So
I was headed to Indy with
you
Wilbur.
had a lot of friends with leg injuries.
Yeah, I sure did, and I was going to break my dear mother's heart. And any mother and son relationship, you'll remember till the day they're gone, or they start hitting health. And Mom, I was asked to be Michael Andretti's teammate when he was going through Wilbur Bunt's racing stables, and I was going to be
Was
going.
that the Craco cars?
No, it was going to be in the what was it? Was it Formula Atlantic or was it Super B? But it was Wilbur Bunce's racing stables, and Andretti was going to do a year, and I was going to do a year. And my mom, during Thanksgiving, just said, please don't, because everyone was going into the walls hard at Indy. And
You know who owns that car that Michael drove back then? Bernard Julick, the guy that runs Jay's Garage. Yeah, because that's how I first met Bernard. We were at Buttonwillow, and he was having a handling problem with that car, and we were there with the F2000s, and he was having a brake lockup issue, and we said, well, when did you corner balance it last? And he says, corner balance? And you know how important it is with a Formula car. And so we had some time, so we rolled the car over on the scales, and God, he was off by like 50 pounds on one corner.
I
So
see.
That's gonna lock up a brake on the opposite corner real quick. So
Anything
we
in
corner
it-
balanced it for him, and then Jay came down and hung out with us
Sure.
for a while, and we had a good time. Nice guy.
Yeah, I think a lot of this in survival in motorsports is, the family, and it's kind of a selfish industry in terms of the road trips and stuff, and it takes a toll after a while. And if you miss this, I know in my particular career, I went to a series called Winston Cup before it was the Nextel series, and I saw the light moving to North Carolina, and I did pretty darn good. But I was coming down to prototypes and GTO and GTU, and we could see that they were going to turn some big fans, some big multimedia radio press and films, and the stock cars were going to roll. And so I moved back to Charlotte, North Carolina. Actually moved to Lake Norman, and it was kind of fun. Tim Richmond was my neighbor, and he was doing the Harry Hyde Folgers cars, Lake Speed. Dale Inman, good personal friend of mine at the time, and he was still, but I don't see him that much, but Richard Petty's crew chief, and Junior and Flossie Johnson, and anyway, I did a little of that stuff, and because the Indy wasn't going to work, and I'm not mommy's boy. I was a grown man, and I'd done well in Europe, but I saw that it might be time to switch gears. Born and raised.
NASCAR isn't the safest series at that time either.
Not at that time. Who's a good buddy of mine? Mark is Bobby Allison. I just saw him at the Motorsports Hall of Fame ceremonies. I went to both those because I'm instructing back there at M1 Concourse. And they had their first debut of this building that they had done outside. Tim McGrain is now the CFO over there and the operating guy. And he asked me to go over there, and so I've been instructing there in the 2021 year. Whatever Johnny O'Connell didn't want, they said, why don't you call Knoop up? So, but anyway.
It's amazing how many nice guys there are in racing.
Oh my goodness, and the NASCAR guys.
Yeah, I met Johnny O'Connell. I was with Jeremy. We were in the hotel lobby down in Long Beach.
Yeah.
And we sat down with Johnny for a while.
And man, those Cadillacs haul butt. So I've been doing some instructing over there, but what I was going to get at is what happened to NASCAR and the safety issue in the year called '87 when I was doing a full season until the sponsor ran out. But I was right behind Bobby Allison. It's the last non-restrictor plate race. Okay. Now dig.
Talladega?
Yes. Now dig this.
So you're doing
the year,
like 230.
No, I don't. No. And I watch. The year's 1987. Bill Elliott's on the pole at 209. I barely get in at 200, but I got in over 200, and then there was provisional people. But watch this. They were the average speed from Bill Elliott in the Coors Melling Pump Special and the provisional was faster. The average speed at Talladega was faster than the Indy 500.
Okay, I'll let you in on something else. You know who one of the junior engineers was on that Melling Coors Bill Elliott car? Peter Hansel.
Okay.
That was one of his first jobs in racing. Well, one of the things I love about being involved in racing is that everybody has the same goal. Everybody has the same dedication, or they wouldn't be there. Because there's 100 other people that want that spot on a team.
Yeah.
And the dedication and everything that people have to racing and to each other, the camaraderie, that a rival team will loan you parts for free to make sure that you make the race.
Yeah.
Because they want to beat you on the track. They don't want to see a DNS. And you know, I mean, we had so many weekends where, you know, another car would have some damage, and they may not make it, they may not. Guys would pitch in from other teams just to help.
Yeah.
And
they
you know, and it's like,
know.
well, what do I owe? You don't owe me anything. Just return the parts. Just ship new ones to our shop, and we're good.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't get that in many industries. You know, racing is very unique.
You know, as we do these sort of retrospective looks, that comes up a lot because we all know what it takes to leave the shop, the road trip, the flat tires going through Texas.
Right here at the corner, we're pulling the trailer out of the shop. We're going up to Laguna for the NASA Nationals with a cup car, and I clip the curb and flat a tire.
Yeah.
I'm about 100 yards from the goddamn shop. I'm like, oh, what kind of weekend is this going to be?
Yep.
Well, we end up podium.
See what I'm saying? You just, no matter what. And it is and I'm not pumping this up because we're all racers in here, but I swear that extra inch becomes an extra mile that they'll do for you. And because it's you know, some people go, God, Rick, isn't it great to be a race driver? I said, well, it is, but I said the nice thing is the better the teams, especially when you start knocking on factory doors, is you all have a skill set. You can't be, oh, I'm a jack of all trades. Well, then all of a sudden, well, you know, it gets to be a little bit much. A skill set is what I love about getting older and recognizing is I'm really confident but not arrogant in operating, whether it's a backhoe at the ranch, whether it's a short takeoff, a stole landing, or whether it's this and that. I'm happy making decisions. I don't boast about it, but I'm not good at putting things together but traffic management and seeing John Fitzpatrick and David Hobbs and Peter Gregg around me, and if I'm in a lower class, I want them to know that this guy's going to keep this constant radius line and we're going to lap him again, but I can do a piece of binder paper with that guy driving that Toyota factory car. Then I'm a blessed man.
But that's not something that you had when you went to Le Mans, 24 years
No.
old. You didn't know any of the other guys were, and
No.
you run a race like that. You know, I remember sitting in at the drivers' meeting at the Daytona 24 Hours,
Yeah.
and you're in a room with 300 drivers.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't know who's in that car you're passing. You know.
Well, now remember this. The reason why there's 300 drivers is I've done many races with just one other co-driver. As the expenses escalated in racing and
Right.
the factory cars got slimmer, the buy a ride syndrome came in, and we've got
Sounds like a Kevin Buckler story.
and we have a hot air balloonist, we have a big game hunter, and we've got a guy from the Porsche Club, and we've got
Lucas Lore.
and we have a rabbit. There you go. That's why there's, pardon me, you said 300 drivers. My last Rolex 24 was 2006, and I was one of 4 drivers. In the 3-pedal era, when you shifted and stuff, and no paddles and sequentials, you don't want the other 3 that could sign the checks, because not only do you have to survive by not hitting each other, but you have to be tender with things. 24 hours is a long time. How many times do we shift? Pre-chicane, Rick, or post-chicane? It's still up, downshift, and you've got to be a ballerina on the pedal assembly when you downshift, and you know this. What you miss going down.
I saw a video recently of Bobby Rahal driving in the Daytona Historics.
Yes.
In an old 911.
I just ran that race October 31st, I guess, and I ran.
That was the gray 911 you drove?
Yeah, I drove a 74 long nose RS, 911 RS ST, and it was Craig Sutherland's. Had a ball. Well, I'll tell you a fun thing about that particular race is they treated me like royalty, and I was humbled by it, because I've been there when it's a full blown. It looks like a battlefield. The flames coming out of between shifts, 935s, and the Mazdas. I mean, it looked like we were in a flamethrower era. The raw fuel coming out of what the white hot turbo shells, and just fuel oozing out of. And half the deal during the Angias and the Brumos days and the Bayside was getting off the throttle at the right time. And you basically, it's like welding without a helmet.
Yeah, I remember in 74, we used to go to the Glen every year, and I remember in 74 standing into the entry to the boot.
Yes.
So you go down the hill and you got the left-hander into the boot, the laces of the boot. And I remember seeing the 2-1 baby Martini Porsches coming in on the first lap. And the year before, they were running the Martini RSRs, which were screaming loud 2.8s. And now this huge wide low thing comes in. It looked kind of like last year's car, but it's quiet. And then it went through the turn with this like whistle, and then all of a sudden he shifted and a flame like 2 feet long comes out.
You were sold.
And I was like, what the hell was that? And that's when we learned about turbos.
See the way you just describe that? It's too much racing then, because the blah of the 2.8s, I mean the RSR motors, if you get about 5 RSRs at a vintage race together, but then also what is that? Yeah. Still to this day, if you start up a 935 for me, or not for me, but they do it it just sounds like a drum roll. There's a lot going on there. It's fun to have the variation of different, the Matras going by and this and that. But to hear your memory of that, it's wonderful. I have moments like that too. I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night going, yes, okay, good night, God. It's crazy. What sticks in your brain? And I go, oh, Rick, are you really digging that? I do.
We had 1 year when I was working in the Ferrari Challenge, and I had the good fortune of working at the Canadian Grand Prix.
Wow.
And
at Mont-Tremblant?
No.
At Montreal?
Yeah, Gilles Villeneuve on the island.
On the island.
And the funny thing, we actually raced Mount Tremblant the next weekend. So
yeah, you may as well. You're there. Yeah.
That's on the Olympic Island.
Yes.
And
where the casino is.
So the Formula One guys, they're all down at the paddock area, but all the support classes are up by Casino Hairpin,
Right.
behind the grandstand of Casino Hairpin. So they would stage the cars. We would come up behind Casino Hairpin and drive down. There's an access road next to the rowing canal. Then where Champions Wall is, they opened up the wall there, and that's where we would pull on track with the race cars.
Right.
So they'd stage us right there. So we're literally standing there waiting to go on track right next to the fastest part of the track, because that's the back straightaway just before
I know
the
it well.
hairpin.
I've driven there, yeah.
And you're a couple of feet lower, so you could see like a camera and a roll bar going by. Maybe a little more if you stood on the pit bike, or you
See
stood
the
on the
helmet.
golf cart.
Yeah.
Then you could see a little more of it. But what I remember is that was 07, so they were running 20,000 RPM V10s. And if you took your headset and you did this with it, it was painful.
Oh, I bet.
It was literally painful to start.
Yeah.
Never heard anything.
See,
like
where
that
you were
before.
staged there is indeed the fastest part. That straightaway is pretty significant there.
Yeah, and we were
Yeah.
standing right where they transitioned to the break point.
Yeah, I did
Full
some.
on 20,000 RPM and 8.
Yeah. I did some support races there in the Tyrrell that I ran for 6 years, and that's an interesting track. And they had some weird animal out there, like a hedgehog or a mongoose.
Yes.
I'm coming to this corner, Donovan, going, "Are you kidding me? I got to change the channel. This guy can't be coming towards me." And it's like caddy
They're
shot.
like groundhogs, but
I was going, "Are you kidding?"
they're about this big.
Yeah.
And what they do is they set traps all over the island about 2 weeks before the race, and they trap as many as they can. But there's always some that get out.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the other teams, one of the Ferraris.
Well,
hit
we're at the
one,
same place now.
and it was quite a mess.
Oh yeah.
And then that year, 07, which was actually Lewis Hamilton's first win that race in 07, one of the Toyotas hit one during the race.
Oh God.
And the Toyota comes in the pits, and the crew wasn't expecting him, and he hit it on the back straightaway, so nobody was expecting him to come in the pits. And he just went straight into pit lane. And I mean, God, the mess of one of those going through radiators and things like that. Oh, sorry to the ladies watching.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, on the Ferrari, it almost totaled the car.
Oh,
I mean, that car was not usable the rest of the weekend. You know, those things weighed about 40 pounds or something, those animals. But they did a great job of getting the majority of them off the island.
Yeah, it's a beautiful circuit, and as you just mentioned, God, what a gift to be able to go the next weekend to Mont Tremblant. The one fast story.
And I got in a little fly fishing in between. I found a guide, and I went
Yeah.
fly fishing on Wednesday up there.
That's what I'm talking about. Well, watch this. The birthday
the
boys,
moment.
I'm going to share something with you about this July 8th connection. I went water skiing. I drove a Formula One car, and a guy wanted me to golf with him all the same day. Where was that? Canada, at Mont Tremblant. I said, hit it. So I went up. I went through a senior men's slalom, because I used to be a hell of a water skier. I'm water skiing, and I'm driving my Tyrrell, and in the same day, I'm going, hey, God, I don't know where you are, man, but you better turn on the love light. This is a good life.
Well, it's like living in California. You could go scuba diving in Catalina
Surfing.
and skiing a Big Bear or Mammoth in the afternoon.
No, I get it.
You know, so yeah, it's
That's good stuff, man.
life is good. Life is good.
I'm just proud to be here in the now.
Rick, had a great time with you today. Great stories. I mean, we've talked for some time, and I think this could go on we could probably film for a week.
Probably. Probably.
But I'm sure we're going to have you back.
I look forward to it, because we go from shore to shore, from Laguna Seca to Daytona Beach. We go from continent to continent. We go to the southern hemisphere, a place called Australia. We go to the top of Pikes Peak. To the high banks of Daytona. I don't know. I've driven in a lot of different series, but I thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, and thank you for the stories. Again, we need to, Katina and I need to get down to Sedette's gallery.
Great.
So she actually talked about maybe going down your way this evening, going to Newport, seeing the boats or something like that. So we may run down that way later tonight. Everybody out there, if you haven't watched it before or listened before, podcast The Racing Year, which Rick is heavily involved in, and I guess one of these days they'll have me as a guest on the Racing Year.
I'd love it. We just had Paul Page, and we had Peter Miles, and our close friend together, John Morton, and I've gotten. It's basically a reunion of people that have been part of my Rolodex and now the internet.
Peter is Ken Miles' son, correct?
Yeah. And Peter is and I was lucky enough to see a lot of these people at the Motorsports Hall of Fame. They coupled both awards because of the COVID. They did 20 and 21.
Oh, okay.
And our dear friend Judy Stropus was inducted.
Mm-hmm.
And if you drove for a team that Judy Stropus was timing for before, all of the telemetry and stuff, you were on a good team. And before transponders, and Judy and I become dear friends. And she went with us to Europe.
So she does those wild lap charts that are diagonals.
50 cars at once, along with Sylvia Wilkinson. Now, come on.
I sat with Jeremy
in
the grandstand at Daytona. One race, at the beginning of the race, we sat there, and that's the way he did his lap charts as a commentator. Yeah. And I watched it, and boy, is that a science.
Yep. It is a science.
You start getting lap cars, especially in endurance racing. Short sprint races are easy.
She would dehydrate herself for 2 days because she would never miss a lap at the Rolex Pepsi 24 hours. And to have her, she not only timed for Roger Penske and the late Mark Donohue, but she has a base rock and foundation in motorsports. Her Rolodex is just unreal. And I just think I'm just proud to know these people, and it's fun to tell these stories because these stories aren't stories, they're becoming history now.
Well, know that you know these people because you're in the Motorsports Hall of Fame, and you're recognized for what you've done.
Now, I'm not in it, but
you're not in it yet.
I was an attendee. But I got to sit at some pretty neat and see about.
Well, how come you're not in it? I think we're going to have to start a petition.
There's no push on that right now. I'm just proud to have to be here in the now. And I'd love to come back. You guys are doing a great show here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, again, we're going to call it a wrap on today.
Good.
And thanks to our producer, Donovan, and we'll all see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. Today's tech tip is on collapsible spare tires. Pretty much everybody with an air-cooled Porsche knows the story of collapsible spare tires. Many, many cars use collapsible spare tires. And what most people don't know is the collapsible spare tire was actually invented in conjunction with Porsche for the 917 race cars. They wanted a tire. The car had to carry a spare tire as part of the FIA regulations. So Porsche got together with, I believe it was BF Goodrich, and they designed the collapsible spare tire to take up less space and have less weight in the race car. So we're going to show you a little tip here of how you inflate a tire. Everybody remember, some people aren't aware of this, but the Space Saver tire does need to be inflated prior to use. We have clients who have tried driving on it flat. We have clients who have tried inflating it while it was in position in the car and damaged their fuel tank. So everybody, whenever you're going to do a spare tire installation, please make sure you look in your owner's manual, follow the instructions properly. On some model cars, they tell you only to use the Space Saver tire in a front location. So you need to take your front tire off, put it on the rear, and then put the Space Saver on the front. So everybody, each model car is a little bit different. Make sure that you check in your owner's manual, inflate the tire properly, keep your speed below 50 miles an hour. We see people all the time on Space Saver tires just going freeway speeds. Absolutely unsafe. Keep an eye on tread wear. You shouldn't put more than about 40 or 50 miles on that tire. And now for another one of our Marc Bixen Live Scotch segments. Today we're going to drink the classic MACALLAN 12-year-old. Beautiful Scotch, always a great staple in the house. And, proper car people, we have Porsche Crest ice cubes, and, it just makes it just a better experience when your ice says Porsche all over it. Cheers. Oh, yes. Like I said, a classic staple. Just beautiful, smooth, maybe a little sherry. Just a wonderful Scotch. For those of you who aren't Scotch drinkers and you just want to impress your friends, drink the MACALLAN. Wonderful, wonderful brew.